And now on the line is John O'Callaghan from Dog Advocacy Ireland. John is a spokesperson and the main founder of Dog Advocacy Ireland. John, welcome back to Near FM.
How are you, Darren? Good to be on Near FM again. Thank you for the exposure.
Alright, cool. John, neither of us planned it, but today is actually 6 months to the day since our first interview on Near FM, although we have since done a couple of shorter interviews at a couple of animal welfare demos that Lisa O'Connor organised in the city centre. As it has been 6 months since our first interview on John, where we spoke more at length, could you remind our listeners today, for those who don't know, about why and how you set up Dog Advocacy Ireland, please?
Absolutely, Darren. I didn't realise that it was the 6 month anniversary. Maybe we should get out the glasses. What do you think? Have a little celebratory drink. Yeah. Look, the reason for setting up Dog Advocacy Ireland in the first place, Darren, was, look, Ireland is puppy farm capital of Europe, a disgraceful distinction to hold, to our shame. And it's been like this for decades. Nothing has been done about it. So that it's not just the puppy farming that Dog Advocacy Ireland is about, but it's a major part of the motivation in setting up Dog Advocacy Ireland, because it must be addressed. It can't continue to be ignored and the negligence and as if it doesn't exist. You know, this is a criminal industry, should not be happening. So we have animal welfare legislation, but there is no enforcement.
Yeah, I didn't know. Are you saying puppy farming has actually, or Ireland has been the capital of Europe for decades? I thought it was only the last couple of years, no?
Well, no, it's running longer than that, Darren. You know, and it's when you delve into it, and I've done research into this, you know, and I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but you know, there are 3 government departments have responsibility for dog welfare. And, you know, everybody's looking after it and nobody's looking after it. And as if that wasn't chaotic enough, we then have all 31 local authorities thrown into the mix with their fingers in the pie of dog welfare. It is in an appalling sick state. It's dysfunctional. The current system is not working, because clearly if it was working, Ireland would not be puppy farm capital of Europe. And this gross, sick, appalling abuse and barbaric abuse of dogs continuing. As we speak, there are literally hundreds of puppy farms in this country. So we're talking thousands of dogs being mistreated and abused. And it would appear that those relevant bodies, those authorities with responsibility, are completely and utterly abdicating that responsibility.
I interviewed Herman Unke from the PRO for the Party of Animal Welfare, the demo. I interviewed him recently by phone, and he was telling me that his party think that all puppy farms, both legal and illegal, should be made illegal. They should be illegal in general, because he says there's a grey area between legal and illegal puppy farms. Would you agree with him that all puppy farms should be made illegal?
Well, puppy farm, you know, in itself, that is a nice kind of soft, friendly connotation. A farm is a nice place, you know. That's the perception. These are puppy breeding factories. That's what they are. So we have to distinguish between a legitimate dog breeder who's doing it. They may be breeding a specific breed, and they're doing so ethically and morally correct. It's their love of a particular breed of dog. You know, these are people who are doing it legitimately, and I have no quarrel with that. Okay, so to ban everything is not the solution. You know, the people who are legitimately breeding dogs are not doing it with a breed for greed mentality, to abuse and mistreat dogs just for monetary gain. That's not their reason. It's the love of a particular breed of dog, and I don't have quarrels with those people.
Okay. I know puppy farms is a huge reason why one of maybe the biggest or one of the a huge reason why you set up Dog Advocacy Ireland. Before we go on, are there any other big issues in relation to dog welfare that kind of encourage you to set up Dog Advocacy Ireland?
Well, the lack of enforcement, as I've already touched on, Darren, there's little point in having legislation, and there is the legislation in the statute books is quite adequate. Okay, some of it could be improved, amended, or maybe introduce some new legislation, but there's little point if there's no enforcement. It's lip service legislation. So, if I'll give you an analogy. If I'm ill and I go to the doctor, there's little point in a doctor putting a sticking plaster on my arm. Yeah. He's got to diagnose my illness. He's got to give a course of treatment for the illness. I go back to my GP to review my condition, and there'll be further treatment if the condition hasn't cleared or I'm not restored to full health. So that has to be the approach. I mean, the introduction of additional pieces of legislation, I'm not wholeheartedly in agreement with it, because it's like putting the sticking plaster on the illness. It's not treating the condition. It's not diagnosing the condition. And until there's acknowledgement, and real acknowledgement, by the relevant government departments, and there are three of them, which is chaotic in itself. So there needs to be one authority with accountability, transparency, and responsibility for dog/animal welfare. Not this chaotic 3 government departments and then 31 local authorities thrown into the mix. It's dysfunctional. It's not working, and clearly it's not working. So we need a diagnosis of the problem. So we need to acknowledge that Ireland is puppy farm capital of Europe, to our shame. So now, where do we begin to address that?
Okay. You are doing great work with some Oireachtas members since Dog Advocacy Ireland was established, aren't you, John?
Well, yes, there's a kind of a three-strand approach to Dog Advocacy Ireland, Darren. First of all is the establishment of the organisation, because, 49% of Irish households own a dog. That's a huge demographic, and any politician who's interested in his career at all would pay attention to that, because if 49% of his constituents own a dog, or her constituents own a dog, well, they ought to be paying attention. So then, with that in mind, the idea of establishing Dog Advocacy Ireland with such a huge dog population, people are apathetic that nothing is ever going to change. The situation is just getting worse, so they're completely and utterly apathetic about it. So Dog Advocacy Ireland is there to give meaningful change and to force meaningful change here. And in doing so, it's the establishment of the organisation. There is a website, dogadvocacyireland.ie, and I would encourage people to log on to it and to support us in our work. The second strand, and not in any particular order, is to engage, sustained engagement with media like yourself, as we're doing now, to highlight the issues that are causing this atrocious, appalling abdication of responsibility for dog/animal welfare. We have to get it out there. People need to be aware of how bad it is, right? And to sustain. There's no point in having one big focus of attention on dog welfare and then nothing for 6 months. It's a sustained media focus approach, and then obviously our legislators are the only people who can affect meaningful change. So yes, Dog Advocacy Ireland, the third strand, and again in not in any particular order, is to engage with the political system, because that's the only way we can affect meaningful change.
Okay, and to talk about the political system, one issue we didn't talk about is grown hugely in the last couple since COVID, I believe, is the issue of stolen dogs. Bearing in mind the big growth in stolen dogs and the puppy farming, and you already said this as well. Like it is easy for a lot of people, maybe most people, to feel despondent that there's no hope, that nothing can be done. But we're actually, I believe, not far away from big potential change on these two issues, because I believe, because Pottertub being the TD from Aintu, working with yourself, I believe, has set up a group, and he has two bills that could be coming before the Oireachtas again before the end of the year. Can you tell us more about this, John?
Well, I'm not actually working with Aintu at all, Darren. I'm not. I've had some little engagement with them, but to go back to what I said earlier, I'm not a huge believer in introducing more layers of legislation that won't be enforced. There's little point. You know, again, the analogy of the illness, we must acknowledge that Ireland is puppy farm capital of Europe, and all that comes with that. The negligence and the abuse and the mistreatment of dogs, animals, that has to be acknowledged, and then we must look at how the problem needs to be addressed. Putting more layers of legislation, I don't believe, is the answer.
Okay, so the issue of puppy farming is a huge issue, and stolen dogs is a huge issue, and the ordinary welfare of dogs, like say occasionally some owners of dogs are abusers of dogs, like they hit the dogs and stuff. That's animal welfare in general. That's a huge issue. Just for the sake of clarification, are there any other issues, or are those the three issues you're working on?
Well, yes. I mean, the issue of the stolen dogs, which has become, there's a greater situation where dogs are being stolen on a more regular basis, and I think that actually does tie into. I don't have the stats or anything to prove it, but the reason for stealing some of these dogs is to use them in on puppy farms for breeding purposes. You know, so there is a link there. There's a proliferation of dog thefts, which hasn't been there before, you know. And the pandemic kind of highlighted because people were off work, parents were off work, children were off school. So there was a situation where they logged on to websites or whatever, see a cute little puppy. Oh yeah, we'd love that, you know. And then when there was the cost of puppies like rocketed during the whole pandemic period. So that's fueling the puppy farm industry even more. Mm. Just to add on to that, Darren, I mean, you'd be well aware that currently, because since the pandemic is over and people are back at work and kids are back at school, there has been a huge abandonment of dogs, and rescue centres are just overflowing, full to capacity, with the abandonment of dogs and the rescue of these dogs in their efforts to try and rescue and rehome some of these abandoned dogs. You will appreciate that, and like the likes of Dogs Trust, My Lovely Horse, all of those rescues who are doing Trojan work, but it's like as if they're firefighting, you know.
Okay, John, I maybe should have asked you this as a start to the interview, but you have a public awareness campaign going at the moment, don't you? Can you tell me more about this?
Yes, there's a radio advertising campaign just been launched, Darren, which obviously will focus on Dog Advocacy Ireland and the issues that we're talking about just now, puppy farming and such, so that to create an awareness, a public awareness of the seriousness of the issue, so that, you know, it'll be running until mid-October, I believe, and, you know, hopefully that people will become more aware, if they're not already aware, of the existence of these puppy farms and people buying unwittingly or otherwise, buying these puppy farm dogs, you know, fueling this criminal industry. So it is to create that awareness and to create a talking point, and hopefully, you know, there'll be further engagement with media as a result of the advertising campaign. And obviously, I would expect that some of our politicians would pay attention once they hear the the advertising campaign, and we'll log on to the website or get in touch with Dog Advocacy Ireland. We'll certainly get in touch with them to address the appalling negligence and the scandalous situation of Ireland being public farm capital of Europe. I'm sorry if I'm banging on about it, but there's no point in talking about it. The illness needs to be diagnosed and treated.